If you sign that, you won't just lose the deal, you'll lose the company. The room didn't react right away. It never did when the wrong person spoke. The glow of a 98-inch wall display washed the boardroom in cold blue light, reflecting off polished glass, tailored suits, and untouched bottles of imported water. At the center of it all, Daniel Whitmore sat still, Montblanc pen hovering a half-inch above a $200 million contract, his signature waiting at the bottom like a final breath. Around him, executives leaned in with quiet confidence, legal teams scrolling through tablets, analysts whispering numbers that sounded safe, predictable, controlled. No one turned toward the voice. Not yet. Ava Brooks stood near the far wall, badge clipped slightly crooked to her hoodie, fingers still resting on the edge of a rolling IT card she wasn't supposed to leave unattended. She hadn't planned to speak. People like her didn't interrupt rooms like this. People like her reset passwords, fixed printers, disappeared before meetings started and after they ended. But something in the code she'd seen, just a flicker buried in a back-end log, had felt wrong. Not broken. Designed. "Excuse me," she said again, quieter this time, but steadier. "That traffic spike isn't random. It's a masked entry point." A few heads turned now. Not curious, annoyed. A senior engineer near the table exhaled through his nose, barely glancing at her. "We're in the middle of something," he muttered, tapping his tablet like the answer would stay there if he pressed hard enough. A woman in a gray suit leaned toward Daniel and whispered something behind her hand. He didn't nod, didn't react, just stared at the contract, as if the interruption hadn't earned even a second of his attention. Ava swallowed, feeling the weight of every eye that refused to meet hers. The air felt tighter now, like the room itself was deciding whether she belonged in it. "It's not a glitch," she added, her voice finding a strange calm. "It's an intrusion attempt. If you sign while the system is exposed, they'll have access to client data within minutes." That did it. A low chuckle rippled from the far end of the table. Not loud, not cruel, just dismissive. The kind that erased you without effort. Daniel finally moved, but not toward her. He set the pen down with measured precision and leaned back slightly, eyes shifting. To his head of security. "Is there a reason our meeting is being interrupted by IT support?" he asked, his tone even, controlled, already bored with the answer. The words landed colder than a shout. IT support. Not her name. Not her warning. Just a category. The head of security straightened. "No, sir." He stood, smoothing his jacket as he walked toward Ava, his steps quiet against the carpet but heavy with intention. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to step out." Ava didn't move. Not yet. The screen behind them flickered for half a second, so fast it could have been missed, but she saw it. The same anomaly. The same pattern she'd flagged. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with certainty. "You have about 30 seconds, she said, eyes fixed not on the guard, not on the executives, but on the system only she seemed to be watching, before they stopped knocking and come all the way in. This time, the room didn't laugh. It didn't react at all. It just paused, like something invisible had brushed past it, light as static, and no one was sure if they'd imagined it. Daniel's gaze shifted, just slightly, not to her face, but to the screen. The pen stayed on the table. The signature remained unfinished. And for the first time, the silence in the room didn't feel controlled. It felt uncertain. The silence did not break all at once. It thinned, stretched, and then fractured under the weight of something unseen as a faint pulse rolled across the wall display again. This time longer, more deliberate, like a breath held too long and finally released. One of the analysts frowned and tapped his tablet harder, as if pressure could force clarity. Another executive leaned forward, squinting at a column of numbers that had not been there 10 seconds ago. Daniel Whitmore did not speak, but his fingers moved slightly on the table, not restless, not nervous, just calculating. Ava saw it before anyone else did, a secondary thread branching off the main network like a shadow splitting from its source, subtle, precise, intentional. Her voice came quieter now, but sharper, cutting through the low hum of confusion. "They are mapping your internal structure right now," she said, her eyes never leaving the screen. The head of security stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. "You need to step out immediately." But there was less authority in it now, more uncertainty than command. Ava shook her head once, small, controlled. If I step out, you lose visibility, she said. And for a second, no one corrected her. Across the table, the senior engineer finally turned fully toward the display, his fingers flying across his tablet, cross-checking logs, pulling up diagnostics. His brow tightened, just slightly. That is not possible, he murmured, but his tone lacked conviction. The room shifted again, not physically, but in posture, in breath, in the way eyes began to move not away from Ava, but toward the same thing she was watching. The system flickered again. This time a section of the dashboard froze, then refreshed with a lag that should not exist in a system this expensive, this optimized. One of the legal advisors whispered, "Is that normal?" No one answered. Daniel's gaze lifted fully now, not at Ava, not yet, but at the screen behind her. His jaw tightened just enough to notice. "Run a full system check," he said, calm, controlled, but faster than before. The senior engineer hesitated, just a fraction too long. "We are already running it," he replied, and that hesitation did more than any alarm could. Ava exhaled slowly, steadying herself. The numbers aligned in her mind. The pattern, the delay, the mirrored access points. She stepped forward, not waiting for permission. Her sneakers soft against the carpet. The IT cart wheels creaked slightly as she moved past them. The head of security reached out as if to stop her, then stopped himself, his hand hovering midair before dropping back to his side. Ava reached the terminal at the end of the table, the one no one had touched because it was not meant for them. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for half a second, not from doubt, but from timing. "You have 20 seconds now," she said quietly, more to the system than to the room. And then she began typing, fast but not frantic, precise, controlled, lines of code appearing on the screen like a language only she was fluent in. The room did not interrupt her this time. No one laughed, no one whispered. The only sound was the soft, rapid rhythm of keys and the low hum of servers somewhere far below the building. One of the analysts leaned closer to another and whispered, barely audible, "Who is running that script?" And this time, no one answered because they were all watching her, not as IT support, not as background, but as the only person in the room who seemed to understand what was happening. Daniel's pen remained untouched on the table, the contract still unsigned, his attention no longer divided, his eyes fixed now, finally, on Ava Brooks as the system behind her began to change in ways no one else could explain. The cursor blinked once, twice, then vanished as Ava executed the first command, and the screen responded with a subtle shift, not dramatic, not obvious, just a recalibration that only someone watching closely would notice. A thin line of activity rerouted from one node to another, cleaner, tighter, controlled. The senior engineer leaned forward now, no longer pretending disinterest, his voice lower, almost cautious. "What are you isolating?" Ava did not look up, her fingers moving with quiet certainty. "Not isolating," she said, redirecting. The word hung in the air, unfamiliar to most of them in this context. Another flicker crossed the display, longer this time, revealing a hidden layer beneath the interface, a ghost network running parallel to the visible system. One of the analysts inhaled sharply. That was not there before. Ava's jaw tightened slightly. "It was," she replied. "You just were not meant to see it." The room shifted again, this time unmistakably. Chairs creaked as people leaned forward, tablets were set down, attention narrowed. Daniel Whitmore stood slowly, not abruptly, not in alarm, but with the kind of deliberate motion that signaled a change in control. He stepped closer to the table, his presence filling the space without a word, his eyes fixed on the evolving display. Ava typed another sequence, faster now, the rhythm steady, controlled, each keystroke purposeful. The system responded with resistance, a slight delay, a hesitation that felt almost alive. She adjusted instantly, rerouting again, cutting off one access point only to expose 3 more. Her voice dropped, more focused, almost to herself. "They built redundancy into the breach." The senior engineer frowned, now fully engaged. "That is not standard." Ava shook her head. "It is not meant to be." She paused for half a second, scanning the flow of data, tracing the pattern backward, her eyes narrowing slightly as recognition settled in. Not surprise, not fear, just confirmation. "They are not just inside," she said quietly. "They are waiting for the signature." The words landed heavier than anything before. Daniel's gaze shifted from the screen to the contract still resting on the table, untouched, the implication clear without being spoken. One of the legal advisors straightened abruptly. "You are saying this is tied to the deal?" Ava did not answer immediately, her fingers moving again, pulling deeper into the system, layers unfolding one after another, encrypted pathways, revealing themselves under pressure. She exhaled slowly, then spoke. "I am saying the timing is not a coincidence." Another pause, shorter this time, then a sharper intake of breath from across the table as a new window appeared on the display. A trace log, live, active, mapping outbound signals to an external source. The senior engineer stepped closer, his voice no longer dismissive, no longer certain. "Can you track it?" Ava's fingers hovered for a fraction of a second, then resumed, faster. Now, the rhythm tightening, the room silent except for the soft percussion of keys and the distant hum of servers pushing against their limits. "I already am," she said, her voice steady, grounded. The screen pulsed again, but this time the movement was different, controlled, contained. The hidden network began to collapse inward, piece by piece, like a structure losing its foundation. The analysts exchanged glances. No longer skeptical, no longer dismissive, just watching. Daniel remained still, his expression unreadable, but his attention absolute. Ava's final command hovered on the screen, a single line. Waiting, her hand paused above the key, not from hesitation, but from precision. 10 seconds, she said quietly. And for the first time since the meeting began, no one questioned her, no one interrupted, no one looked away, because now, everyone in the room understood exactly what was at stake, and exactly who was holding it together. The countdown did not echo out loud, but it settled into the room anyway, heavy and precise. As Ava's finger lowered toward the key, and every screen in the boardroom seemed to hold its breath with her. 9 seconds. The hidden network pulsed once more, weaker now, like a signal losing strength. 8 seconds. The trace log updated in real time, strings of data collapsing inward as the external connection strained to hold its ground. 7 seconds. The senior engineer shifted closer, no longer leading, no longer questioning, just watching with a focus that bordered on disbelief. 6 seconds. Daniel Whitmore did not move, his eyes fixed on the single line of code waiting to be executed, the contract behind him forgotten. 5 seconds. Ava exhaled slowly, steadying the rhythm in her chest, her fingers relaxed but ready. For seconds, a faint alert flickered at the corner of the screen, an automated system attempting to regain control, to re-establish access. 3 seconds. Ava adjusted one parameter, subtle, precise, cutting off the last viable path without triggering a full system lock. 2 seconds. The room felt smaller now, tighter, every person inside it pulled into the same invisible point of tension. 1 second. She pressed the key. The response was immediate but quiet. No alarms, no dramatic flashes, just a smooth, controlled shift as the hidden network collapsed completely, the unauthorized pathways sealed. The outbound signals cut cleanly, the system stabilized in a single, continuous motion. The wall display refreshed, this time without delay, without flicker, the ghost layer gone as if it had never existed. For a moment no one spoke, not because they did not know what had happened, but because they did. The senior engineer blinked once, then again, his voice barely above a whisper. "It is gone." Ava nodded slightly, her hands resting lightly on the keyboard now. Not triumphant, not tense, just still. "For now," she said, her tone even, grounded in reality rather than relief. Daniel stepped closer, just one step, but it changed the space between them entirely. His gaze moved from the screen to her hands, then to her face, studying, measuring, not dismissing this time, but recalibrating. "How long do we have?" he asked, his voice controlled but different now, less certain. Ava glanced at the trace log, confirming what she already knew. "They will try again," she said, but not the same way. She tapped the screen once, bringing up the final trace, the origin point blinking faintly. "They were waiting for your authorization to complete the access." A quiet realization moved through the room, subtle but unmistakable. The legal advisor straightened, his voice tight. "So if we had signed, Ava finished the thought without looking at him. They would have had full access within minutes. The words settled heavier than any accusation. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in recognition. He turned his head just enough to look at the contract still lying on the table, untouched, the pen beside it now insignificant, then back to Ava. "And you stopped it," he said, not a question, not quite a statement. Ava shook her head once, small, almost dismissive. "I delayed it," she replied. "Stopping it depends on what you do next." The distinction lingered, sharp and clear. The room did not return to normal, not yet, because something fundamental had shifted, not in the system, but in the way every person in that room now saw the one they had almost escorted out. And for the first time since she had spoken, no one looked at Ava Brooks as if she did not belong. No one reached for the contract anymore. It sat there under the cold light like something outdated, irrelevant, a decision that no longer belonged to the moment. Daniel Whitmore remained standing, but the authority in his posture had shifted, not gone, just quieter, more deliberate. His attention no longer scattered across advisors and projections, but anchored to the one person who had seen what no one else had. Ava Brooks stepped back from the terminal slightly, not retreating, just creating space, her eyes scanning the stabilized system one more time, confirming what the numbers already told her. The breach was sealed, but the pattern lingered in her mind. Incomplete, intentional, designed by someone who expected to be inside longer than they were allowed. The senior engineer cleared his throat softly, the sound almost unfamiliar in a room that had been so controlled minutes ago. "We need to run a full audit," he said, but his tone lacked the certainty it carried earlier. Sounded more like a request than a directive. Ava nodded once without looking at him. "Start with your API gateways," she said, her voice calm, steady. They left markers there. The engineer hesitated, then turned quickly, already calling out instructions to his team, his earlier confidence replaced by urgency that did not come from ego, but from understanding. Across the table, one of the executives whispered to another, their voices low but no longer dismissive, just unsettled, trying to piece together how close they had come to something they did not even see. Daniel moved closer to the terminal, close enough now that he could see the reflection of the code still faintly visible on the screen, lines that meant nothing to him but everything to her. "Walk me through it," he said, not as a command, not as a test, but as a genuine request. Ava glanced at him briefly, measuring the shift, then turned her attention back to the display. "They embedded access triggers inside normal traffic," she explained, her tone even. "Nothing obvious. Nothing that would flag standard alerts. It only activates under specific conditions." She paused for a fraction of a second, then added, "Like a high-value contract. Authorization." The implications settled again, heavier this time because it was clearer. Daniel's gaze flickered toward the contract and back, his jaw tightening slightly as the realization deepened. "So they knew," he said quietly. Ava did not answer directly. Instead, she brought up another layer of data, highlighting a sequence that repeated with subtle variations. "They anticipated," she said. "That is different." The distinction lingered, precise and intentional. The room absorbed it in. Silence. The legal advisor shifted in his seat, no longer speaking, no longer guiding, just listening. The power structure that had defined the room an hour ago felt distant now, reshaped by something none of them could ignore. Ava stepped back fully from the terminal this time, her hands lowering to her sides, her posture relaxed but grounded. She had done what needed to be done, nothing more, nothing less. Daniel watched her for a moment longer, not searching for weakness, not dismissing her presence, but trying to understand it, recalibrate around it. "You said they will try again," he said, his voice quieter now, more measured. Ava nodded once. "They will adapt," she replied. "They always do." A brief silence followed, not uncomfortable, just real. Daniel glanced around the room, at the executives, the engineers, the advisors, all of them still processing, still catching up, then back to Ava. "And you," he said, the question unfinished but clear. Ava met his gaze this time. Steady, unflinching. "I already have," she answered. And in that moment, the difference between reacting and understanding became something everyone in the room could feel, even if they could not yet explain it. The room did not return to its earlier rhythm, It shifted into something quieter, more aware, as if every sound now carried weight it did not have before. Ava moved slightly away from the terminal, but did not leave it, her eyes still tracking subtle changes. In the system that most of them could not even see, the wall display looked stable, clean, almost too clean, like a surface that had just been wiped but still held the memory of what had been there. Daniel Whitmore remained where he was, closer now than he had ever been during the meeting, his attention no longer divided by hierarchy or expectation, just fixed, present. "Show me where they came in," he said, not demanding, not testing, but trying to understand what he had almost signed away. Ava stepped forward again, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the terminal as she brought up a layered visualization of the network. The lines appeared slowly, building from simple connections into something far more complex, a web that pulsed faintly with residual activity. "Here," she said, pointing to a narrow path buried beneath legitimate traffic. "It looks like normal data flow, but it is not." She zoomed in, revealing a pattern repeating just out of sync with the rest of the system. Subtle enough to avoid detection, precise enough to execute on command. The senior engineer leaned in beside her, his voice lower now, stripped of ego. "We ran diagnostics on that node last week." Ava nodded without looking at him. "You ran what you were trained to run," she replied, her tone not accusatory, just factual. "They designed it to pass those checks." The distinction landed quietly but firmly. The engineer did not argue. He just watched, learning in real time. Across the table, one of the executives shifted uncomfortably, the confidence that had filled the room earlier replaced by something closer to humility. Daniel studied the visualization, his eyes moving along the hidden path, following it as Ava traced it backward, deeper into the system. "And the origin?" he asked. Ava paused for a fraction of a second, then expanded the trace log. The endpoint appeared again, blinking faintly, steady. "Waiting. It is external," she said, "but not random." She adjusted the display, overlaying the connection with recent transaction data, timelines aligning in a way that was too exact to ignore. Daniel's expression tightened slightly as the connection became clearer. "The partner firm," he said, not quite a question. Ava did not confirm it directly, but she did not deny it either. "The access point aligns with their integration request," she said. "The timing aligns with your authorization window." The implications settled deeper this time, no longer theoretical, no longer distant. The legal advisor looked down at the contract, then away, as if the paper itself had changed meaning. Ava stepped back again, giving the system space to breathe, her posture calm, controlled, but there was a quiet tension beneath it. Not fear, not doubt, just awareness of what came next. Daniel remained silent for a moment, absorbing the full weight of the situation. Then he turned slightly, addressing the room without raising his voice. "No one signs anything," he said, the authority still there, but reshaped, grounded in something more than confidence. It was informed now, earned in a different way. The room responded immediately, not out of habit, but out of alignment. Decisions that had seemed inevitable minutes ago now paused, reconsidered. Ava watched the system one more time, her eyes narrowing slightly as a faint flicker appeared at the edge of the display, subtle, almost invisible. But there, she did not speak right away. She simply moved her hand back to the keyboard, her fingers hovering once more, because whatever had just been stopped was not finished, and she knew it before anyone else did. The flicker did not disappear this time. It lingered at the edge of the display like a whisper refusing to fade. Ava's fingers lowered slowly to the keyboard, not rushing, not reacting, just aligning with something she already understood. The system looked stable to everyone else. Clean lines, balanced traffic, no alerts, no visible threat. But she saw the delay between packets, the microsecond hesitation that did not belong. "They are still here," she said quietly, not to alarm the room, but to anchor herself in the truth of what she was seeing. The senior engineer turned sharply, his earlier composure replaced by alert focus. "That is not possible," he said, but his voice lacked the confidence it once carried. Ava did not argue. She simply pulled up a deeper layer, one most of them had never seen before, a diagnostic view stripped of interface, stripped of comfort, raw and exposed. The lines appeared slower now, heavier, as if the system itself resisted being seen this clearly. Daniel stepped closer again, his presence no longer distant, no longer removed. Where? He asked. And this time it was not about authority, it was about trust. Ava zoomed in on a narrow segment of the network, almost invisible, buried beneath legitimate operations. They left a listener, she said, something passive, waiting. The words settled into the room with a different kind of weight. Not immediate danger, but quiet persistence, the kind that lasted longer, the kind that returned when attention drifted. One of the analysts leaned forward, squinting at the screen. It is not transmitting anything, he said, trying to find reassurance in the stillness. Ava nodded slightly. Not yet, she replied, her tone calm but firm. It activates when the system trusts it again. The implication was subtle but sharp. Trust had been their weakness, not their strength. The room absorbed that in silence. Daniel's gaze remained fixed on the display, then shifted to Ava, studying her not as an interruption, not as a risk, but as the only stable point in a situation that no longer followed familiar rules. Can you remove it? He asked, and there was something different in the question now, not expectation, not assumption, but recognition of what it actually required. Ava did not answer immediately, her fingers hovering above the keys as she traced the listener's connection points, mapping its reach, its dependencies. The system responded with slight resistance again, a hesitation that confirmed what she already suspected. If I remove it wrong, she said slowly, it triggers a fallback. She tapped the screen lightly, revealing a secondary pathway, darker, deeper, more concealed. And then we lose visibility completely. The senior engineer exhaled quietly, the realization settling in. This was not just about stopping something. It was about understanding it fully before acting. Ava leaned slightly closer to the terminal, her eyes narrowing as she adjusted her approach, not cutting, not blocking, but studying, learning the pattern in real time. We do not remove it, she said finally, her voice steady, certain. Daniel's brow tightened slightly. Then, what do we do? He asked. Ava's fingers began moving again, slower this time, more deliberate, each command precise, calculated. We let it think it is still inside, she said, the idea unfolding as she worked. We control what it sees. The screen responded subtly. The listener remained, but its view began to change, filtered, redirected, contained within a space Ava was shaping line by line. The analysts exchanged glances, not fully understanding, but recognizing the shift. This was no longer defense, it was strategy. Daniel watched the transformation without interrupting, his earlier certainty replaced by something quieter, deeper, respect forming not from position, but from clarity. Ava's hand slowed as the system settled into its new state. The listener still present, still active, but no longer free. She leaned back slightly, her shoulders relaxing just enough to show the tension had shifted, not gone, just moved. Now we watch them, she said softly. And for the first time since the breach began, the room was not reacting to a threat, it was anticipating one, guided entirely by the person they had almost asked to leave. The system did not react immediately, and that was the most dangerous part. The stillness felt intentional now, not safe, not resolved, just waiting. Ava kept her eyes on the filtered layers she had built, watching how the hidden listener adjusted to the new environment. Its signals faint, cautious, probing the boundaries she had quietly reshaped around it. They are testing the edges, she said softly, more to the pattern than the people behind her. The senior engineer leaned closer again, his voice barely above a breath. Can they tell? Ava shook her head slightly, her focus unbroken. Not yet, she replied. But they will if we move too fast. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, resisting the instinct to act, choosing instead to observe, to understand. The wall display reflected a system that looked perfectly normal, dashboard steady, metrics aligned. Nothing to trigger concern for anyone not looking deeper. But beneath that surface, the hidden activity pulsed in slow, careful intervals, like something feeling its way through a dark room. Daniel stood just behind her now, close enough to see the subtle changes in her posture, the way her shoulders tightened slightly with each micro shift on the screen. What are they looking for? He asked quietly. Ava did not answer right away, her eyes tracing the pattern as it repeated, then shifted, then paused. She leaned in slightly, isolating a sequence. watching how the listener responded to the controlled data she was feeding it. Confirmation, she said finally. They want to know if the path is still open. The words settled into the room with a quiet clarity. This was not over. It had only changed shape. One of the analysts straightened, his voice uncertain but trying to catch up. So we just keep them there. Ava nodded once. For now, she said, we let them believe nothing changed. Her fingers moved again, slower than before, introducing slight variations into the data stream. Not enough to alert, just enough to guide, to lead. The system responded subtly. The listener adjusted its behavior, following the path she was creating, unaware that it was no longer moving freely. The senior engineer watched closely, his earlier skepticism replaced by something closer to respect. You are steering it, he said, almost to himself. Ava did not look at him, but her voice carried a quiet certainty. I am showing it what it expects to see, she replied. Nothing more. Daniel's gaze shifted between the screen and Ava, the realization settling deeper with each passing second. Control was no longer about shutting something down. It was about understanding it well enough to guide it without being noticed. The room remained silent, not because they had nothing to say, but because anything said too loudly felt like it might disrupt something fragile and precise. Ava's hand slowed again as the system settled into the illusion she had built. The listener continued its quiet probing, unaware that every movement was now contained, observed, redirected. She leaned back slightly, her breathing steady, controlled, but her eyes never left the screen. They will make a move soon, she said, her voice low, certain. Daniel nodded once, not questioning, not doubting, just accepting the rhythm she had set. The contract on the table remained untouched, irrelevant now in a way no one could have predicted, because the real decision was no longer on paper. It was unfolding in real time. Inside a system only one person in the room truly understood, and she was not rushing it, not forcing it, just waiting for the moment when the people on the other side would reveal exactly who they were. The change came without warning, not loud, not obvious, just a shift in rhythm that Ava felt before she fully saw it. The hidden listener paused longer than before, its probing pattern breaking just enough to signal intention. Her eyes narrowed slightly, tracking the delay, the way the signal lingered at a decision point instead of passing through. Here, she said quietly, her voice steady but sharper now. The room tightened around the word. The senior engineer leaned in instinctively, his breath shallow. What is it doing? He asked, but his tone already carried the answer. Ava did not look away from the screen. It is choosing, she said, her fingers hovering but still, resisting the urge to intervene too early. The display flickered once, then stabilized. A new thread appeared, thinner, more precise, branching off from the contained path she had built. Not random, not exploratory, intentional. Daniel stepped closer, his presence quiet but fully engaged. Choosing what? He asked. Ava exhaled slowly, her mind aligning the pattern with what she had already mapped. What to trust? She replied, the words landing with quiet weight. The system responded again, the new thread extending further, reaching toward a segment Ava had intentionally left visible, a controlled vulnerability, subtle enough to appear natural. The analysts exchanged quick glances, the tension rising not from confusion now, but from anticipation. They were watching something unfold, not reacting to it. Ava's fingers moved slightly, adjusting the flow by a fraction, just enough to guide without forcing. The listener responded, following the path, committing to the direction she had shaped. The senior engineer let out a quiet breath. It is taking the bait, he said, almost disbelieving. Ava shook her head once, small, precise. No, she said. It is making a decision. The distinction mattered, and everyone in the room felt it even if they could not fully explain why. The thread extended deeper, connecting to a node that had been silent until now. A dormant segment suddenly active. The screen updated in real time, revealing a chain reaction that spread outward from that single choice. Ava's eyes moved quickly, tracking the expansion, mapping it as it happened. Her voice low, controlled. They are revealing their structure. The words shifted the energy in the room instantly. This was no longer about defense. It was exposure. Daniel's gaze sharpened, his focus absolute. Can you trace it back now? He asked, Ava's fingers began moving. Again, faster than before but still precise. Each command layered on top of the last, building a path that mirrored the one the intruder was creating. The system responded with a cascade of data, connections lighting up one by one, not chaotic, but interconnected, intentional. The origin point grew clearer with each passing second. The senior engineer watched in silence, no longer questioning, no longer leading, just learning. Ava's breathing remained steady, her posture grounded, but there was a quiet intensity in the way she moved now. The moment she had been waiting for unfolding exactly as she anticipated. The thread reached its endpoint, a single node, isolated but undeniable, blinking steadily on the display. Ava slowed her hands, confirming, verifying, ensuring there was no mistake. Then she spoke, her voice calm but carrying a weight that filled the room. "It is them," she said, not naming the company, not needing to, because everyone in the room already knew which name sat behind the contract still lying untouched on the table. Daniel did not look at the paper this time. He kept his eyes on the screen, on the truth unfolding in front of him, the illusion of partnership dissolving quietly into something far more calculated. Ava leaned back slightly, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the terminal, the system stable, the intruder contained, but the reality exposed. And for the first time since the meeting began, the power in the room did not come from titles or signatures. It came from clarity, and she was the one who brought it into the light. No one spoke the company's name, but it moved through the room anyway, heavy and undeniable, carried in the way eyes shifted and then avoided each other, in the way the contract on the table no longer looked like opportunity, but exposure. Daniel Whitmore remained still for a moment longer, his gaze fixed on the blinking node that confirmed everything. Then he turned slowly, not toward the advisors, not toward the legal team, but toward the decision he had almost made, the pen still resting beside it, untouched, insignificant now. He reached out and closed the folder with a quiet, deliberate motion, the sound soft but final, the kind that did not need explanation. Across the table the legal advisor straightened, his voice cautious. "We can delay the signing," he offered, but the words sounded small compared to what had just been revealed. Daniel did not respond to him. His attention returned to Ava, standing near the terminal, calm, grounded, as if she had simply done what needed to be done and nothing more. "If we had signed," he said, his voice measured, steady. Ava met his gaze without hesitation. "They would have had full system access tied to your authorization credentials," she replied, not dramatic, not exaggerated, just precise. The room absorbed that in silence, the weight of it settling deeper than any raised voice could. The senior engineer stepped back slightly, running a hand across his jaw, his earlier certainty gone, replaced by something quieter, something more honest. "We did not see any of this," he said, not as a defense, but as a realization. Ava nodded once, her tone unchanged. "You were not meant to," she said, the distinction clear. The system behind her remained stable, the hidden listener still contained within the environment she had built. But now it was no longer just a threat, it was evidence. Daniel turned back toward the display, studying the trace one more time. The path, the origin, the intent, all of it laid out in a way that could not be ignored. His voice came quieter now, but sharper, more defined. "We need to document everything," he said, this time addressing the room. But the authority in his words no longer came from assumption. It came from understanding. The team responded immediately, not out of routine, but out of alignment with what had just been uncovered. Ava stepped slightly to the side, giving them space, but her eyes never left the system, still watching, still tracking, because she knew something they were only beginning to realize. This was not over. Daniel glanced back at her, studying her for a moment longer, then asked, "Can they see us tracing them?" Ava shook her head slightly. "Not if we keep it controlled," she said. "Right now they think they are still inside, still hidden." She paused, then added, "That is our advantage." The room quieted again, but this time the silence felt different, not uncertain, not reactive, but focused, deliberate. Daniel nodded once, absorbing the shift completely, then turned back to the table, his hand resting briefly on the closed contract, not in hesitation, but in acknowledgement of what it had almost cost. He removed his hand and stepped away without looking back. The decision made without needing to be announced. Ava watched him for a second, then returned her full attention to the system, her fingers moving once more, refining the containment, strengthening the illusion, guiding the unseen presence exactly where she wanted it to be. Because stopping the attack had been only the beginning, what mattered now was what they did with the truth they had uncovered. And in that moment, the balance of power in the room no longer belonged to the one who almost signed. It belonged to the one who understood what no one else could see. The room moved with purpose now, quiet but precise. Conversations low and focused as the legal team began outlining next steps, and the engineers mirrored Ava's containment across secondary systems. But she remained where she was, eyes fixed on the terminal, watching the listener she had trapped, not as a threat anymore, but as something more fragile, something that could be broken if handled carelessly. Her fingers moved slowly, refining the environment around it, feeding it just enough data to keep it engaged, just enough silence to keep it patient. Daniel Whitmore approached again, this time without hesitation, without distance. He stopped beside her, not above, not behind, just there, aligned with her line of sight. If we expose them now, he said quietly, we protect ourselves. Ava did not look at him, her gaze still tracking the subtle pulse of the hidden signal. Yes, she replied. But they disappear. She paused, adjusting a parameter by a fraction, watching how the listener responded, then added, and we lose the rest of the network. The words shifted something in him, not resistance, not disagreement, but recalculation. He looked back at the display, at the controlled illusion she had built, understanding forming not from authority, but from observation. So we wait, he said, more to himself than to her. Ava nodded once. We let them believe they are winning, she said, her voice calm, steady. That is how they show everything. The senior engineer stepped closer again, his earlier urgency now focused into something quieter, more disciplined. We can pull logs, build a case, he offered. Ava shook her head slightly. Not yet, she said. If you move outside this layer, they will feel it. She tapped the screen lightly, the contained environment glowing faintly under her control. Right now, this is the only place they trust. The engineer nodded slowly, absorbing the shift in approach, learning to follow rather than lead. Across the room, the executives had stopped whispering, their attention drawn back to the center, to the quiet control unfolding in real time. Daniel remained still beside Ava, his presence no longer commanding the room, but grounded within it. How long? He asked. Ava exhaled softly, her eyes narrowing as she tracked another subtle adjustment in the listener's behavior. As long as it takes for them to reach deeper, she said. They think they are close. The system pulsed again, slightly stronger this time. The listener committing further into the path she had created, revealing another layer, another connection. Ava's fingers moved again, capturing the data, mapping it silently, building a structure of understanding that extended far beyond what anyone else could see. Daniel watched the process without interrupting, his earlier instinct to act replaced by something more deliberate, patience shaped by necessity. And when they reach it, he asked. Ava's hand slowed, hovering for a moment before settling lightly on the keyboard. Then we close everything, she said, her voice steady. Not just here, but everywhere they touched. The clarity in her words left no room for doubt. The room absorbed it in silence, not passive, but aligned, the plan forming not through debate, but through trust in the one person who had seen the truth from the beginning. Ava leaned back slightly, her shoulders relaxed but her focus unbroken, the system stable, the illusion intact, the unseen presence moving exactly where she needed it to go. And for a brief moment, the noise of the room faded into the background, leaving only the quiet rhythm of data, the soft glow of the screen, and the steady, controlled breathing of someone who had chosen not just to stop the threat, but to understand it completely before letting it go. The shift came in a single, quiet moment, so subtle that anyone not watching closely would have missed it. The listener did not just probe anymore. It committed, its signal deepening into the controlled pathways Ava had shaped, reaching further than before, touching layers of the system it had not risked earlier. Her eyes narrowed slightly as the pattern aligned exactly with what she had been waiting for. Now, she said softly, not loud, Not urgent, but absolute. The room stilled instantly. Daniel turned toward her. No hesitation, no question, just readiness. What do you need? He asked. Ava's fingers moved with calm precision. No rush, no wasted motion. Do not touch anything outside this layer, she said, her voice steady. If they feel a change anywhere else, they will pull back. The senior engineer nodded quickly, already signaling his team to hold. Every external action paused. Every system outside her control left untouched. Ava's attention remained locked on the terminal, the network map expanding in real time as the intruder revealed its final connections. The structure no longer hidden, no longer fragmented, but whole, visible, undeniable. She exhaled slowly, her hands hovering for a fraction of a second before continuing, capturing everything, every path, every endpoint, every silent agreement between systems that had never been meant to be seen together. Daniel watched the display, the full scope unfolding in front of him, the scale, larger than he had expected, deeper than any single breach. That is everything, he said quietly. Ava shook her head slightly, her voice calm but certain. That is enough, she replied. The distinction mattered, because what she had now was not just exposure. It was proof. Her fingers moved again, initiating a sequence that did not close the system yet, not immediately, but prepared it, aligning every controlled pathway, every containment layer, every silent boundary she had built since the beginning. The room held its breath without realizing it, the analysts watching, the engineers still, even the executives silent, all of them sensing that something final was about to happen. Ava's voice came low, measured. When I close this, they lose access everywhere, she said, not looking away from the screen. Not just here. Daniel nodded once, his voice steady. Do it. And there was no hesitation in it now, no doubt, just trust. Ava's hand paused above the final command, not from uncertainty, but from precision, timing everything to the exact moment the intruder committed fully to the path she had designed. 1 second, 2 seconds, the signal pulsed stronger, deeper, fully inside the controlled space. And then she pressed the key. The system responded instantly but silently. The pathways collapsed in perfect sequence, not chaotic, not reactive, but controlled. Every connection severed at once. Every hidden access point sealed before it could retreat. The listener disappeared, not fading, not escaping, just gone. The display stabilized into something clean and final. The network quiet again, but different this time, secured in a way it had not been before. No one spoke for a moment, not because they did not understand, but because they did. The weight of what had just been prevented settling slowly across the room. Ava leaned back slightly, her hands lowering from the keyboard, her breathing steady, controlled, as if she had simply completed a task. Nothing more. Daniel remained where he was, his gaze fixed on the screen for a second longer before shifting to her. Not searching, not questioning, just seeing. And in that quiet moment, the difference between who held power before and who held it now no longer needed to be explained. The room did not erupt, it did not celebrate. It simply exhaled, a quiet release that moved through every person without a sound. The screens remained steady, clean, almost indifferent to what had just happened, but the weight of it lingered in the stillness. Ava stepped back from the terminal, not dramatically, just enough to create distance between herself and the system she had been holding together. Her hands rested lightly at her sides, her breathing even, controlled, as if she had done nothing extraordinary at all. The senior engineer looked at the display one more time, then at her, his voice low, almost uncertain. It is completely sealed, he said, not asking, just confirming what he could now see. Ava nodded once, her gaze still on the screen. For now, she replied, not out of doubt, but out of understanding. The system was safe because it was understood, not because it was perfect. Across the room the executives slowly returned to their seats, but the way they sat had changed, less rigid, less certain, more aware of how close they had come to something they never noticed. The contract remained closed on the table, untouched, forgotten in a way that felt permanent. Daniel Whitmore stood in place for a moment longer, then reached for it. Not to sign, not to review, but simply to move it aside. He placed it at the edge of the table without looking down, his attention already elsewhere. He turned toward Ava fully now, no distance left between them, no barrier of title or assumption, just a quiet recognition that settled into the space between them. You saw it before anyone else, he said, his voice steady but different now, stripped of the certainty it carried at the beginning. Ava did not respond immediately, her eyes still reflecting the faint glow of the screen. It was there, she said simply. You just had to look. The words were not sharp, not pointed, just true, and that made them land deeper than anything louder could. Daniel held her gaze for a second longer, then nodded once. A small movement, but one that carried more weight than any command he had given that day. I should have listened, he said, not as an apology offered to the room, not as a performance, just a quiet acknowledgement placed exactly where it belonged. Ava looked at him then, not with satisfaction, not with resentment, just with a calm steadiness that did not need either. You did, she replied. Eventually. The word lingered, not as criticism, but as fact. The room remained quiet around them, no one interrupting, no one shifting the moment away, because something had changed that could not be undone by noise. Daniel glanced once more at the terminal, then back at her. We are going to need you on this team, he said, the statement clear, direct, but without the authority it might have carried before. Ava's expression did not change. She simply turned her attention back to the system for a brief second, confirming its steady state, then reached down and adjusted the crooked badge on her hoodie, the small plastic clip catching the light as it straightened. I was already on it, she said quietly, and then she stepped back, not leaving the room, not stepping forward, just returning to where she had been before anyone noticed her. The screens continued to glow, the servers hummed far below, and in the reflection of the glass, Daniel Whitmore stood still for a moment longer, seeing not just the